Attorney General Mark Dreyfus is calling on Australian men to step up and end what he calls a crisis of male violence in Australia. His comments follow the murder of 9 women in the past 18 days, including the 5 killed in last weekend's stabbing at Bondi.
Fundamental to that shift is acknowledging that overwhelmingly violence against women in Australia is perpetrated by men. We have a crisis of male violence in Australia. It is a scourge in our society and it must end. To create lasting change, women cannot be expected to solve violence against women alone. It's time for men to step up. It's our responsibility to educate ourselves, our sons, our colleagues and our friends.
That's Attorney General Mark Dreyfus speaking there, and those comments were made at a family violence symposium held in Melbourne yesterday. Tarang Chawla was also at the event. Tarang's sister Nikita was murdered by her husband in 2015, and Tarang has been a vocal advocate against gender-based violence and harassment ever since. He joins us now from Melbourne. Tarang, thank you so much for your time this morning. You were at that family violence symposium yesterday. Mark Dreyfus saying that he doesn't think women should be expected to solve violence against women. He says that men need to step up. What does it look like for men to step up?
Good morning, John. Good to be with you today. It looks like some of what Mark Dreyfus touched on, which is men stepping up by educating themselves, educating their sons, educating their brothers, their friends, and also, one of the methods of primary prevention is men calling out the sexist or harmful behaviour of other men. But it also comes down to men recognising in themselves if they have certain attitudes and then taking steps to act.
When it comes to speaking up and calling out, as you say, and also taking action against violence against women, what's the difference between that coming from a man and that coming from a woman?
It's a great question because, as the attorney touched on, we can't expect women to be shouldering the burden for the violence that's being perpetrated onto them by men. So what it looks like for men to, say, call out other men or to educate other men is that those types of men tend to listen to the voices and opinions of other men. And that's why I think it's really crucial to have public role models for this. When we see footballers, when we see cricket players, when we see sporting heroes in Australia actually say things like it's not on and actually have a strong cohesive message against family violence, I think it resonates with the community so much more.
You know this tragically well, as we mentioned. Your sister Nikita was murdered by her partner. You obviously speak out against male violence against women. Where else can those voices be heard? Because we know particularly young men, they often don't listen to their parents, they often don't listen to their teachers. Where can we find those voices?
It's such a great question, Joe, because you're so right. Those young people aren't going to listen to their parents. They aren't going to listen to their teachers. And regrettably, in some cases, maybe not even going to listen to me. But I think that we have to go to where people are. So I used the example earlier around sport. Other examples for young people include actually harnessing what's online, the fact that they are on the internet and using positive messaging in those settings, because that's where often young boys and men face the risk of being radicalised in their views towards women. They face the risk of finding, through their social isolation, a community of what they think are like-minded people, but actually are radical, harmful views about the role of men and masculinity that then can cause harm either to themselves or to the wider community. So I think we really need to have targeted focuses online.
When you look at the voices, particularly online, that are vying for the attention of particularly young men, people like Andrew Tate comes to mind. When you look at those voices that are being listened to, do you feel hopeful? What do you feel?
I mean, I feel whenever I hear or see the name Andrew Tate, I feel probably a combination of feelings. I think for me, what's so crucial is that we look at the reasons why young boys and men are actually driven to figures like Andrew Tate in the first place. I think that simply as saying, "Oh, Andrew Tate is bad," or Jordan Peterson, or any particular figure who's risen to prominence through the online social media world is bad, is not going to actually support young boys and men to see them in any other light. We need to increase their ability to think critically, to actually take from them what is positive. A lot of young boys will tell me, a lot of young men will say, I like Andrew Tate's messaging around working out, or his hustle culture, of working really hard. And working hard is not a negative thing, right? But his harmful views about women, particularly in a developing impressionable mind, can cause great harm. And so it's about giving them avenues that actually support a positive pro-social understanding of masculinity. Because when I see the effects of Andrew Tate, and a recent report that I know you covered on the ABC around how female teachers are actually self-selecting out of the profession because of the classroom environment that figures like Andrew Tate have created. So it's a widespread problem, and it's not just the one woman a week or one woman every 9 days who's been killed as a result of harmful attitudes and harmful behaviours. It's also the widespread culture of sexism and misogyny.
And as you say, present them with an alternative voice as well online. That's important here as well. I just want to get your quick thoughts as well on the media coverage of domestic violence, because that in the past and often still is really problematic, focusing too much on the perpetrator, presenting them as being a good person, and often victim blaming in the reporting as well. When you look at the narrative around covering domestic violence in the media, do you see that things are changing there?
Oh, certainly things are changing, and it's heartening, particularly given the experience that my family had and the way that Nikki, my sister, was reported in the mainstream media at the time of her death. There's certainly been progress, but for every piece of progress that we make, we will still see time and time again media reporting that consistently gets it wrong in terms of victim blaming or humanising the killer beyond what's actually appropriate. So we'll get to a point where we're not showing the killer's life and upbringing so that we can understand where the red flags were and where we went wrong as a society, or where something happened that shouldn't have happened or could have been intervened in. We're actually just humanising them like, oh, what a lovely person they were, when they've actually just murdered their whole family. So I think we've got a long way to go still in that type of reporting.